Thanks for staying with News at Prime tonight. We continue our conversation with Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. We're talking about the state capture inquiry, and already we've heard that they will be applying for an extension at this point. Not really clear how long you want, until mid-year next year, you said.
Well, the hearing of oral evidence, we would really be working towards trying to finish it by March, April, but at the latest, June. But when we prepare to make the application to the High Court, we'll apply our minds much more carefully to say exactly how much we need. But as things stand, it seems to me that we may have to apply for an extension that would go beyond the half of next year, mid-year, and towards during the second half of the year. It may well be that it would go to the end of next year. Sure. But if at least the hearing of oral evidence is completed during the first half of the year, and so that the second half is left for the preparation of the report, then that would be okay.
What are the considerations that you're making to ensure that, number one, the report, once it has been concluded, escapes review or withstands review? Because, of course, we have seen this week that not all reports, at least out of commissions of inquiry, can withstand that scrutiny.
Well, put it this way, as we do this work, we are not over-concerned about the report being taken on review. Our focus is to do our work properly. Because if we do our work properly, even if it is taken on review, as long as we are satisfied that we did our work properly, that's fine. People do have a right to go to court. So our focus is just that, one, we do our work properly. Two, we try to be as fair as we can to everybody. Nevertheless, we draw the line where we need to draw the line so that everything goes according to plan. But in terms of being taken on review, once the report is out, there's nothing one can do to have a guarantee. And I think when you look at the nature of this commission, the nature of the investigation that this commission is doing, if it makes certain findings against certain people, it's very likely that there will be somebody somewhere who wants to take it on review. It's unlike a commission that may be dealing with just a few people who are affected. If findings are made, it will be against few people. The report that will come out of this commission has a chance of having findings made that go against many people, some of them who have got money to go to court if they want to go to court. So we're not looking over our shoulders. We simply say, let's do our job the way it should be done.
You raised the issue of fairness, and I wonder, because it came out quite prominently, especially during the time that former President Jacob Zuma was giving evidence before the inquiry. Do you find yourself in a position where you have to overcompensate in terms of the perception that can be created or that could exist out there, that you're being biased when you're hearing evidence, whether it's from former President Jacob Zuma or any other evidence, any other witness, rather?
Well, I believe that I simply try to make sure that, one, I am fair, two, I'm seen to be fair by all concerned. But I accept that when I think I'm fair, there may be people who think differently. And what is important to me is that I satisfy myself that I'm being fair. Even if somebody else might say, no, this is unfair, if I'm satisfied that I'm being fair, I'm going to proceed on that basis.
We've seen your evidence leaders and some of those who work with the commission really come under fire. Oftentimes there's tension between themselves and the legal teams that are representing witnesses. And it's very few times that you would step in their defense. Why is that?
Well, they are big boys and girls. They can handle anybody themselves. Well, put it this way, although the Commission's legal team is the Commission's legal team, to a very large extent, I have got to try and deal with them in the same way I'm dealing with other legal terms, insofar as that is possible. And as I say, you know, they are big boys and girls, and if they are being attacked by other legal teams, they can handle that. But of course, there are cases where I would intervene. For example, if somebody says something about you know, a member of the legal team, where I think that I must make it clear that it comes from me, I'll do so, to say, I'm the one who made that decision, and I made that decision alone. So anybody who wants to criticize must criticize me and not somebody else. So there are situations where I think I must come in, but otherwise I try and just see whether everything is going well.
This commission takes place at a time in our country where the political landscape is becoming ever increasingly polarized, whether it's within organizations or political parties such as the ANC or whichever parties that exist. But I think for the purposes of this inquiry, it's really been the governing party that's been at the center of that. Different factional battles also at play. I wonder how much of that you then also consider when you have to do your work, especially given the amount of evidence that's coming out that points to prominent leaders within the governing party who themselves have yet to come and answer. On Estina, we're yet to hear from Ace Magashule, who's been named, especially by some of those the farmers, as having been a key figure in that.
Well, I think what our concern is to make sure that we are fair, and that we carry out our functions the way we should. And that means it doesn't matter which faction you may be in. If there is evidence implicating you, that evidence will be heard, and we will give you an opportunity to be heard as well. Nobody is going to be condemned without being given a chance to be heard. And it doesn't matter from which faction you are in. If you are implicated and you are in that faction, you are implicated and you will be dealt with in the same way as somebody who may be in that faction. So we don't pay attention to which faction. The question is whether you are implicated and whether you have information, as far as we believe, that should help the commission in its investigation. And also, I mean, you might be outside of the ANC, you might be in other parties. If we believe you have information that can help us, we will approach.
Do you find yourself having to tread that line carefully, given how quickly whatever you do might be interpreted to be one way or the other?
Excuse me. I think what I do, one, I need to satisfy myself that I'm being fair. But two, I need to be careful in case in handling a certain situation, I may be perceived, even if wrongly, to be biased. But the first thing is, am I satisfied that I'm being fair? But also, I don't want to do something that may be misunderstood if I can avoid it. So one tries to avoid anything that would give rise to misunderstanding. But the bottom line is, one has got to be fair. One has got to make sure that whoever is implicated, no matter where they come from, and no matter what their station in life is, if they're implicated, they must be dealt with in the same way.
How much is that burden? And I take it then in the same strokes, we heard from Justice Cameron the other day as he was retiring, talking about how there's plenty of work that lies ahead, especially for the judiciary. At the same time, we're seeing political parties raise questions about the integrity of the judiciary and whether or not yourselves as judges can be trusted for the kind of work you do in the courts and even your findings. So I wonder how much of that then also becomes a consideration. That do you feel that you are under even more scrutiny than you would have been before?
Well, I'm sure that one is under scrutiny more maybe than before, but in terms of feeling, I think what is very important is not to be overly concerned, as long as you are satisfied that you are doing the right thing, and that you are, as far as possible, you are seen to be impartial, you are seen to be fair, and you have to accept that some decisions that you take will be unpopular, and that's just being part of being a judge.
Have you taken any knocks on a personal level for the work that you're doing and how you're doing it?
In terms of the commission?
Yes.
Not really, that I can think of, not really. Of course, there was some criticism that I became aware of before the hearing started last year. There were some criticism and so on. I think somebody did a cartoon of me that wasn't very pleasant. But, you know, when you are carrying out a public function, when you hold public office, you will have to expect that there will be people who will have certain views about you, and you mustn't be too sensitive, you mustn't be overly sensitive, and you mustn't expect that people would be praising you most of the time.
Sure.
You must just do your work.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, in a moment then we'll come back with the questions that you've put up for Deputy Judge Chief Zondo. That's going to come up after the short break. But before we go to that break, as I said earlier, we took to the streets. We asked you how you feel about the work that the Commission is doing, and we'll get the Chief Justice's response in a moment. Let's take a look.
Mr. Zondo, I want to ask you a question now. Today, you are not scared, threatened by people, or were you before threatened by people or the community? So I need some answer from you, Mr. Zondo.
I'd like to know, these people with all the farmer tax, they catch them and they go to court and nothing is happening to them. Even if you take it, the children that's doing something wrong, or they're saying no, they're underage, what's going to happen with them? They all comes off, and I mean, they're getting older and they're just getting worse and worse. Can't they do anything to them?
Mbuzo wam ku Deputy Justice kukubana ezimali zonke sivayo into kokubana zisetyenzisiwe zabarhafi beSouth Africa ingaba zizawubuyiswa na?
The main guys are the Guptas, and my question is, why are they not prosecuted yet, and why is nobody following up this story with the Guptas?
I would like to know that of the only 18 clean audits that we had throughout the country in the last annual year, and that accounted to 25 billion rand of government wastage and expenditure, why are the municipalities not being held more accountable for the monies that are being used from taxpayers, which is not going to service delivery where it should be going?